Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience.
Hi guys, welcome to The Alternative Experience. Now I have a great podcast episode for you today as I have company. Earlier this week I had the pleasure of sitting down with Jenny Powers, PhD, to discuss her new book, On the Origin of Being. Now it's a great book. I'm not just saying that because she was on the show. It really is a great book, and I read it in about 2.5 days with one of the busiest work schedules ever. I couldn't put it down even though I had to, and I'm going to read it again this weekend. Now, it explains how our hunter-gatherer ancestors used to live. You know, that's something that I talk about a hell of a lot, and it has a special focus on all of the beneficial, positive, natural behaviours that they practiced that us modern-day humans have all but forgotten about. It was such a lovely conversation, so much so that all of the questions that I prepared, I was really happy with my preparation with this, super proud, showed my wife and I kept showing off, and I didn't look at those questions once because what we ended up having is a really, really comfortable or completely organic conversation, so much so that I apologise, I forgot to mention her co-author Luke Comer. He wasn't on the show and we just completely forgot to mention him. It wasn't out of spite, but what I will do is I'll include all of Jenny's social media, the website for the actual book itself, as well as the Amazon link for anyone that would like to pick up a copy. I highly recommend it because I genuinely believe that if everyone had this kind of knowledge, we would all be in a much better place to improve our health, our longevity. So please go and buy your copy now. I promise you won't regret it. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, introducing the great and powerful Jenny Powers, PhD. Thanks, guys. But great to meet you. Absolutely amazing to meet you.
It's amazing to meet you too. I can't believe you're in Portugal, Jess said.
Yes, yeah, I'm based in Portugal. Used to be in the UK. We came out here in 2020, around about the time of the madness, which was obviously COVID, but also Brexit, same sort of time.
Oh, yeah.
Things were changing. Movement was becoming a bit more restricted, so we thought we'd take the opportunity and move to the sun. So you're Colorado, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, and we're actually, my family and I are going to Portugal next summer, so we're excited about that.
Well, where are you going? What part?
Sure yet. It's through my kids. So my oldest is a black belt in the Taekwondo Institute that we go to, and every 2 years they do a black belt world tour. And so they announced that next summer will be Portugal. So I'm not quite sure yet. I'm just going to be along for the ride, I guess.
Brilliant. I think they hold a lot of events in Porto, which is up north. My niece did a dance competition there once as well, but you may come down to the south. Down here it's absolutely roasting at the moment. It's so hot. It was 45 degrees today, which in American that's over 100, I think, around about 100. It was very warm.
Oh boy.
Yeah, but it's still very warm.
I can see out your window that it's still light.
Still light at the moment. Yeah, just got a little bit of light.
Yeah.
We'll have that for another half an hour or so, but yeah, I even had to get the my sort of garden shade on I've got a vegetable patch, and I had to put that out on it today because it was just drying everything out. I just couldn't water it enough. Very warm. But back in the UK, it's raining, so I can't really complain. First out the gate, I really wanted to thank you. Bit of a random one. But I generally try and avoid, especially with my podcast, I try and avoid being in too many echo chambers because obviously it's when you're confirming and a bit of confirmation bias, it's quite a bad place to be sometimes. But your book,
very true.
Although I'm only 220 pages in, I've got about another third-ish to go. So far, your book has basically validated a lot of my own practices, techniques, and theories. And for that, I want to thank you. I really do want to thank you. It's really been nice.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you were interested in reading it and that you're enjoying it and that you invited me to be part of what you do.
Exactly. Well, it's all about collaboration as well. And I think, especially with the messages like the one in your book and the ones that I try and give out on my podcast, they do seem to be quite hard to get into a mainstream sort of audience sometimes. So I think it's really nice to spread the
Mm-hmm.
message, especially when you're basing it solely on science, biology, our ancestral sort of
Mm-hmm.
history as well, which I'm sure we're going to go into in more detail. But
Mm-hmm.
I came into my industry, so I was in a completely different industry for many years, suffered with burnout, and then fell into what I currently do subsequent to the podcast, which is, I suppose it's like complementary functional health. So
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot around the sort of nervous system, the gut brain connection, the microbiome, and that kind of stuff. And yeah,
Cool.
everything I did always takes me back to the hunter gatherers, and I talk about it all the time in my content. And I think people
I
might get a
heard
bit bored
that.
about it.
I
Yeah, it's
was
good.
listening. I was listening to I don't know if it was a podcast or if it was one of your Instagram posts,
Mm-hmm.
but you said hunter gatherers, and I'm like, yeah.
Oh yes, oh yes. I mean, it's really weird because it was initially it was my own recovery, and then it became a bit of a passion. I really loved the subject, and I mean, I do
Yeah,
genuinely think that the human body is the biggest miracle on this planet. I mean, just
I totally agree.
even when you take it back to things like the microbiome being actually, if you think about it, we're like a universe. They're little communities of life, you know, like we are, the
Hmm.
pockets of life that we actually inhabit us. So we're like a universe in ourselves, and it blows me away every day.
I
So
love that. Our gut bacteria, we're their universe.
we are their universe. We've got the bacteria in our mouths, our skin, it's all over. So if you
Yeah,
look at it in that way, we are, I suppose, when you just keep taking it down to the smaller and smaller and smaller, we're just
I
another part
I
of that.
love that so much.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No
We
problem
are
at
the
all.
universe.
We are the universe.
Love
Well,
it.
at some sort of level, we are. It just gets smaller and
Yeah.
smaller as you go.
Yeah, well, like that's kind of where the universe, like in reality, but also, I mean, I don't know if you do like meditation and, Buddhism and stuff, like we are the universe.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
universe is part of us. So it's like it
One
goes both
energy.
ways. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
energy. I mean, again, it's if we could all get onto that same path. I mean, it's funny you should talk about meditation. I actually did one of the. I don't know if you've ever done one of the worldwide meditations where they're arranged and you do them at the same time, and it's quite a bizarre energy. It's quite hard to put the finger on because I'm very science, biology. I need to see the mechanisms of
Mm-hmm.
action. I need to see something that takes it a little bit
Mm-hmm.
out of the spiritual, but obviously I'm very open to the spiritual. But the energy that you feel when you do one of these sort of worldwide meditations is it's very hard to explain, but there's definitely something in it, definitely something into us all
No,
becoming into this one.
yeah, I'm very similar because I am a scientist. And it wasn't until, and I was miserable. We can go into
Mhm,
this later, but it wasn't until I started a spiritual path, and I was pretty skeptical.
mhm,
Um, but it, I can't like go against the actual results. I'm not going to be like, well, no, what I'm actually feeling is wrong, like because it's not
mhm.
scientific. Like it can't be
Yeah,
measured, it can't be quantified. But it helped me so much to have
yeah.
this other, I don't know, like you're not just here in this body. You're kind of connected, and that just really, really helped me.
And also to
So
ever actually think that the two can't exist at the same time is
this is
probably
true.
where we go wrong because I think actually a lot of the spiritual and the scientific can explain each other. I mean, again, even if you just
Hmm.
accept concepts like energy, frequency, like coming down to grounding and
Hmm.
things that we were talking about and that you were
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about in your book, it's those things really can actually cross over those two different elements and maybe sort of fill in some of the holes that both sort of theories
Hmm.
and sort of approaches have. No,
Well, and I'm
awesome.
sure
Okay,
with
well,
your work, do you do a lot of like Eastern medicine type things, like more,
so with
it
my
seems like you're more holistic, kind of. Yep.
I would say it's holistic and holistic. So I tend to I work very
Mm.
much on the mind body connection. So
Hmm.
when I started learning about the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and all the systems it kind of it manipulates, controls, or in some way is involved
Hmm.
with, um, I think I saw that there is a connection to even things like the voice that you have in your head, the way you speak to yourself. This can have an
Hmm.
ongoing sort of negative or positive impact in your sort of like your psyche. And obviously, the way those two brains connect with this bidirectional communication, that gut brain axis, they're just sending those positive
Hmm.
or negative signals back, and it leads to either again a very positive outcome where you see people that just love life and they really embrace it, or what is probably 90% of the population is that negative cycle. And obviously, then
Oh
seeing the
gosh, yeah.
physical side of that, where it's inflammation in the microbiome, which then, again, it's just all these things that. So you come back to sort of spiritual or Eastern medicine. When you think about Ayurvedic medicine, for example, their hypothesis, I believe, is chronic illness is 6 degrees away from its spark. So let's say you're
Mm,
anxious, your nervous system is
mm,
imbalanced. That's your kind of spark. It might be a trauma that's caused that, then causes digestive issues like acid reflux, indigestion. You then get another problem. Then you've got ulcers, and then
mhm,
it eventually 6 degrees down, it turns into this chronic illness that we're talking about. And I think whether I think in that way or not, I do believe that actually, if you deal with a foundation, whichever medicine you practice, these elements don't exist. And I think once you have an
mm,
understanding on how all these systems work with one another, how they
mhm,
dysregulate each other when they're not working, you get a little bit of a mental picture, and you can start seeing patterns in certain
mhm,
acute and chronic illnesses, I think. And that's the way I look. But I am very analytical. I am very science and biology based. Mine started
mhm,
with breath work. I wasn't satisfied just knowing that you breathe this way, you feel that way. Well, why is that? So then I started
mhm.
looking into the intrinsic link between breath and the nervous system, and then you just go deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole, and it's just a fascinating subject for myself. So
Like
did
we were
you?
saying before, it's like when I was a immunologist, so I actually studied cell signaling in the innate immune system.
Wow.
And all these tiny, like, okay, the cell would get a signal from the outside, and then the cascade of events that get to, is the cell going to proliferate? Is the cell going to die? Is the cell going to make cytokines? I
Hmm.
mean, I really zeroed in. Like, I feel like you're a big picture and this little picture, and both of
Yeah.
them are both so incredible. Like, how
Yeah.
do we exist?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
really cool.
I think I'm holistic in the fact that I look at so when someone comes to me, quite often the difficulty I have is getting across to people that they'll come in to see me with IBS, for example, and obviously naturally everybody thinks food intolerance, this kind of stuff, and when I start talking about the nervous system and actually getting them out of that dysregulation where they're always in their fight or flight. They're always in that sympathetic nervous system, which means all the
Hmm.
other systems are in standby, not doing what they should be. And that's why you then get digestive issues or immune issues or endocrine issues. But when they first come
Right.
to the door, it's like, well, why are you talking about nervous system? This is my stomach. This is my food. I can't eat these certain foods, etc. But once people jump into it and give it a bit of faith, balancing the nervous system is a very, very effective way of, like I say, taking the legs out of a lot of the downstream effects that often I
Mm-hmm.
think metastasize from it. But yeah, I mean, what you do fascinates me. It's I came to the party late because of my personal issues and finding it and discovering a passion. I wonder how it would have gone if I had that dream at school and my younger years, and
Hmm.
had I pursued it as well. Uh,
I
I actually
totally,
had a
I'm totally in there, the same boat with you too. Even though I wanted to be a scientist, I really wanted to be, and I knew this deep down, I just never did anything about it. I really wanted to be a writer.
yeah.
Um, and so it wasn't until much later in my life where I actually started embracing these things. And then I have the same feelings like, well, what if I had taken, gotten a MFA, or what if I had taken more writing classes, or so I feel the same way. But you know what? We're never too late to the party.
And it's what got you here anyway. So again, we
Exactly.
can sort of regret anything. That's another big part of what I do in my coaching is a lot of the problems that we have is we either live in the past, all those good times, or we worry about the future, worry about all the things that might
Mm-hmm.
happen that never do. And I know again this is a spiritual way of looking at it, but it's very, very true. We completely miss today, and I think a lot of the people
Mm-hmm.
that I speak to when I sort of try and portray this to them. I say watch the deathbed regret videos where you've got these people actually talking
Mm-hmm.
about in that actual final moment where they can't mask it anymore. They can't really. There's no point lying to anybody, and it really hits them. It's like, do you really want to get to that point and think, I didn't really sort of live a life in line with what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Let myself worry about all these things that really aren't important in life. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I came to the party very late, and I really appreciate the fact that I did. So when you were in immunology, obviously you were from like a research academic background, so you were
Bench
yeah.
science.
Hmm. And obviously with the writing now, it's kind of the same kind of thing, because obviously you're reporting on the research and letting people know, but more
Hmm.
of a creative flair and actually a little bit more license, I'd assume.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny when I was writing my dissertation, my PhD advisor was like, you just you're writing too conversationally here. You're writing too familiar. And so I actually had to train myself to not write in that way, to be more scientific and, for papers and stuff. So it was really nice. I'm like, I can write conversationally now. I can, use, different kinds of ways of interacting, other than the strict, straight and narrow. So it was funny.
I'd like to actually see if there's any studies into that as well. But
Hmm.
obviously, going into it and learning the academic, learning the technical side, learning obviously the human body, for example, and then coming back
Hmm.
into it, maybe that's given you like a really good sort of understanding for how these things work. So it's then enabled you to come back and lean into your sort of natural ability, which is the creative side, and now you've also got authoritative sort of stories to tell off the back of it.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. It's funny because when I left academia to start raising my kids, I had the intention of being a fiction writer, and I have several
Right.
fiction manuscripts
Wow.
haven't really gone anywhere yet. They're actually middle grade books, so they're aimed at 8 to 12-year-olds. And so it was so cool because I felt like it was either science or children's fiction. And the
Hmm.
opportunity to research and write this book, I felt like it like brought things together. Like I can, I don't want to ever feel like I did something and wasted my time doing it, even though I don't practice, I'm not a bench scientist anymore. I don't
Hmm.
want to feel like I wasted my time. So this was like so perfect that I can bring my new passion and something that I spent a lot of time, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and I was able to bring it together. Um,
Amazing.
and so that was it really fundamentally changed my life. Um,
Amazing.
and what's amazing is that I feel like now that the book is written and we've gone through this whole process, but while I was writing it, it was quite overwhelming, all of the things that I was realizing that we're not doing, that we're so far off in the modern world.
Mm.
And so it was really overwhelming to me. I was almost paralyzed. I couldn't start making some of these changes because it was just, but so now that I have a little distance from it,
Hmm.
I've probably in the last 2 year and a half, I've started implementing some of the things, and that has completely changed my life too. Um,
Hmm.
and so I feel like, you know, 10 years ago, I would have never been like, what? I wrote a popular science book about evolution, and it changed
Brilliant.
to help people. It's like a self-help book, and I would have never ever guessed that that is something that I would have done. So, um,
Amazing.
it's kind of cool to see where things lead you.
It's very cool when because I think a lot of the problem that people have these days is we get very stuck in comfort zones. And again, coming back to
Mm.
you in immunology, me in my heyday in recruitment, um, very good money, stable paycheck, kind of on paper you've got everything, and everyone thinks you've got it
Mm.
all,
Mhm.
and you feel actually quite bad for not feeling like you've got it all, so you just roll with it and no, I should be happy.
Mm.
I'm so much more sort of lucky than other people, etc. But then obviously
Oh
the
my gosh,
imbalance
yeah.
that that sort of causes when you're sort of going and spending the vast majority of your life, which is your working life, doing something that may be at odds with your core values or how you feel. So it can be quite
Hmm.
liberating when you actually, like you say, you go and do something. And also, coming back to your children's books there, we write things and we put them to one side, or we make some content or a video or whatever, and we put it to one side and judge it, and that'll be rubbish and that won't be well received. But actually, it's quite strange that we judge that. And when you put it out, it's normally those things that do resonate with people. We kind of judge ourselves on behalf of other
Hmm.
people. It's a bit of a projection thing. So to then
Oh,
go and, like you
right.
say, write a book like you have now, like and be a published in a scientific nature as well. That's a big tick off the off the sort of to do list, and a big achievement, most certainly.
Well, I think what was cool is that I feel like it was kind of a step away. Like, so fiction, it's all coming from your head. You're making up stories and you're trying to like have
Mm.
themes and build characters and world building and stuff like that. And so being able to write something starting with facts, starting with
Mm.
research, I think it took away one of those judgmental kind of people aren't going to like you. I guess I struggled with
Yeah.
like, I'm not an anthropologist, so why are people going
Mhm.
to listen to me? But I
Mhm.
know how to do research and I know how to explain research in a way,
Yeah.
hopefully, that people can understand. And so I had to be like, okay, you know, this is not it's not as personal as fiction. Um, but I do have an authority because I wrote this book. I did all this research. So, I've had to really grow into myself. And it's funny we're talking about comfort zones because I was looking, over the last couple of days, I've been listening to some podcasts and looking at your
Mhm.
Instagram. And you have a quote saying that life begins at the end of your comfort zone, time to get
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And I
Yeah.
was like, yes, I have been uncomfortable for a long time, but in a good way. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Growth.
before, when I was doing stuff I didn't want to do and I was miserable, but it seemed like you said, it looked like you had it all.
Mhm.
Um, I was really unhappy. It was a bad
Mhm.
kind of uncomfortable. It was anxiety and depression and stress. And this is, you know, anxiety and stress is not necessarily a bad thing. It's when becomes chronic and you can't return to your equilibrium.
Mhm.
Um, so it's funny because I'm way out of my comfort zone. I'm uncomfortable, and then I'm uncomfortable with being uncomfortable because 10 years ago, it meant that I was doing something wrong. Like I needed to stop what I was doing and look at it, be like, okay, is this really what I want to do?
Mhm.
Whereas now, like I'm uncomfortable and then it goes away.
And you're having experiences off the back of that uncomfortable scenario. You're having these experiences. You're now an author. You can come on shows, etc., and it opens doors, it opens contacts, cooperation, and all this kind of collaboration as well. So
Mhm.
I think that the comfort zone is very, very, very appealing, and that's the whole point. Is that we've got these two systems in our body that run us, as you know. You've got the heart, which wants creativity, experience. It wants to go out and sort of see the world, write poetry, and then you've got the nervous system that just wants to keep you safe. It's just like, no, 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 we're not doing that. Stay
Mhm.
safe. Get away from the edge, and they're
Yeah.
in constant
Yeah.
conflict. And I think that we used to understand these energy centers, like the gut feeling. You've got
Mhm.
the solar plexus and the sacrum, that gut feeling, and then listening to your heart. Actually, sometimes your heart is trying to tell you something, but we're always stuck in this one here. We're just in this one,
Mhm.
going round and round and round and round in circles. And I think we've lost touch with our intuition and our innate sort of ability to sense things. And I think we've been convinced that it's airy fairy. It's again, it's spiritual. No, it's not. These things are built
Mhm.
into back in our ancestral
Mhm.
time to save us from being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. They peaked, they
Yeah.
kept us on our toes, and they kept us alive in our communities. And now we're just taught
Yeah,
to
and that's
ignore them.
I think having that, really being in touch with your needs, being in touch in the present moment, for the most part, when you're in nature, it's kind of reduces your stress. There's low input. This is
Mhm.
why nature therapy is so effective. If you have a group of people who go into nature or a group of people who walk around the city and then you test their cortisol levels, it's just
Oh,
like
yeah.
totally different. Um,
Hmm.
but when we evolved, we actually had real danger. So the fight or flight was really necessary. But
Hmm.
at the same time, we didn't live in the future or live in the past because we had to take care of our needs right then, right?
Hmm.
We needed to run. We needed to build shelter. There's a storm coming. We need to find shelter. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I'm going to have a baby. We have to like, we lived within our bodies and listened to our bodies and did
Hmm.
what our bodies told us to do. And we have this, and that's completely natural. And people think that that's spiritual, like you said, because it's not practical to live in the present moment. You need to plan and you need to learn from your mistakes and you need to look to the future. And um, that's just not how our ancestors viewed time and viewed
No.
life.
Life was
So it
about
wasn't
serving the
until,
body. Life was about serving the
Mhm.
body, wasn't
Yeah,
it? Whether it be the food that
exactly.
you're eating, whether it be, like you say, the sort of survival skills that we took in, the time we went
Hmm.
to bed in at sunset, sunrise, when we were waking up. All these things were in service to our survival, and again, to our body,
Hmm.
to our families. We've lost touch.
Yeah. Yeah, and then when the agricultural revolution came along, so the term coined for like a hunter-gatherer forager economy is a immediate return economy. That means
Mhm.
that, whatever they're doing, they gather food, they eat it. They build a shelter, they live in it. But when you started to have to plant seeds, now you have to wait 6 months and you have to weed and you have to tend to it every day. So now we become very future oriented because we've put all of our eggs in this one basket. And so what if this fails? What if this doesn't, we don't have a crop, then we have a famine, so that's called a delayed return economy. And so I really feel like things started to change with the agricultural revolution and how we viewed time. We used to view time as circular, and now it's very linear. You can only go forward. But that doesn't stop you from really reliving the past over and over again. And that's why we're living in our heads all the time, because the only thing that's real is this present moment. Like my thoughts about, going to the pool tomorrow are just thoughts. My thoughts about, maybe I droned on too long at the podcast I did yesterday. I'm thinking about that. I'm like, oh man, did I just talk too much? That's just a thought. It already happened. It's over. So, living in the present moment, I think, is a thread that runs through the book, because even if it doesn't necessarily say, well, what does living in the present moment have to do with sleep? Well, we mask all of the signals that our bodies give us to sleep, to watch one more Netflix video or to do work. Or what about food? Well, do we pay attention to our hunger when we're hungry, or do we just eat because it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And then because of what we're eating, we want to snack all the time because we have to feed the sugar hunger. And work is the same way. Like people are like, well, how do you get any work done if you're just in the present? Well, just because you're in the present moment doesn't mean you can't plan, right? It means you can be more clear about what you need to do. Rather, if you are in the present moment and you're not in your fight or flight state, then you can figure out what you need to do. But if you're like, oh my gosh, the deadline, you're going to be totally stalled with what you're going to have to do right now. So I really, and of course, nature, being in the present moment in nature is like going home. So I really feel like that present moment thing is the thread that kind of goes through the whole book, being in touch with the present moment and your body's needs.
Definitely 100%. And again, just being open to, I mean, that does extend to nature, because again, even coming down to things like I mentioned it briefly earlier, grounding. I mean, obviously our ancestors naturally would have slept on the ground. They would have, even if they had any clothing at all, it would have been animal skins, which would have still earthed to the earth's surface. And I mean, at least in the last 70 or 80 years, we've had these rubber-soled shoes. We've got concrete everywhere. I find it quite funny, actually, the amount of my coaching clients where I say, on day 2, tomorrow I need you to go out in your garden or wherever there's some land and just earth yourself. They're like, there's no land around me. And they have to go a couple of miles to find like a little park or a little verge where they can just ground their feet to the earth's surface. And coming back to the research there, I don't know if you're aware of it, you probably are, but the research into concrete in straight lines that actually fires up the sympathetic nervous system.
Oh, I did not know that.
So they did did a research study. I think it was in New York, so close to Central Park, and quite literally people spending all the time in, like you say, in the city with those tall skyscrapers, concrete everywhere, the noise, the pollution, the high energy, I suppose, that sort of excitatory energy that's always in the air, and then just simply taking.
Yeah, I'm gonna get hit by a car. Am I gonna get mugged?
Exactly, and then just walking straight into Central Park and just seeing everything just immediately sort of balance and reset.
Everything just softens.
Don't think people get that enough these days. But the problem is, and I think the biggest problem is, because we have this, I mean, obviously I can see you and I can see everyone around me, and I'm aware that we're all in this human body, but we don't see ourselves. We walk around all day with this point of view angle, and we kind of forget that we're attached to this body that we actually rely upon to obviously have a long, prosperous and healthy life. Yeah. And we don't pay any attention to it whatsoever. And I think that we pay so little attention to it now, we don't understand it in any way. So I've always been quite intuitive with my body. I mean, things like I had bad knees as a kid, and I would always be able to tell if I had a bad back, it was probably because I was walking funny, and then I'd be able to find,
Hmm.
oh, actually, it's not my back. It's like a tendon on the back of the leg, and I'd be able to massage it out and
Yeah.
use a bit of intuition to try and learn about your body. It's not always where the pain is that's the cause of it, kind of thing. But
Hmm.
we've got no knowledge at all about our bodies. I mean, like I say,
Hmm.
even myself, that I find it quite intuitive. I was quite surprised to find how intrinsically linked the breath and the nervous system are, and then how
Hmm.
intrinsically linked they are to all those other systems that I've already mentioned. And
Hmm.
that then straight away takes you from, why would the nervous system help this, to, this all kind of makes sense. It's sort of like a really intricate jigsaw puzzle that once you've got pictures of it in your head,
Hmm.
a lot of it becomes not common sense, but quite intuitive. And again, I think that people
Yeah,
just
I
don't
like
have
that
the
word,
base.
intuition.
Yeah, people don't have the base knowledge, I don't think, on their biology, and they don't have that
Mhm.
understanding or time or interest. And I think that little bit of interest can really change your life massively.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, once you start learning stuff like this, it's like you can't stop learning it and you want to learn more because it changes how you think, it changes how you feel. Um, and once you kind of realize that everything's connected, heart and mind and
Mm-hmm.
with other people, and there's this energy, um, you learned that it's like it feels natural. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like I think a lot of situations in the world are forced,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We force ourselves to do something, but when we have that kind of awareness, we can just flow. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's what you want to get to, right? That's the ultimate thing, being in flow.
Oh,
And but
100%.
that's what feels easy and right and not forced and not I don't know, we're not trying too hard. We're
No,
just letting things happen.
I had a very good friend of mine who sadly passed away a few years ago, but he used to have a really,
Hmm.
really cool saying. And he used to say to me, I see a lot of humans trying, but not many humans being. And I was like, that always used to stick with me. And it was,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
and
the
it,
thing. Like we're not a human. Oh, I've heard a similar quote. We're not human doing, we are a human being. So
yeah,
I like that
yeah,
trying too.
yeah. He was like, I see a lot of humans trying. And what he meant by it is, I
Hmm.
suppose, multifaceted. Some people that just aren't very good humans, I suppose, but in some
Right.
way. But I think the actual point he was trying to make is everybody's trying to be something rather than just being. And I mean, I think we
Hmm.
all, a lot of people, everyone at some point in their life suffers from maybe second guessing themselves and thinking, oh, this is what this person would expect me to say and how I should show up, rather than just doing it. And
Hmm.
maybe actually facing acceptance. Someone might go, yeah, great idea. But they may go, actually, no, I don't agree with that. And then realizing that that's not a bad thing. You just need to find people that do align with your
Hmm.
natural way of being. And again, it's a horror. I don't like the word, but it's like the authentic self. I use say it to people all the time. I'm like, that's the one thing that I think is going to help a lot of people find balance. Is just accepting who
Hmm.
they are, accepting that they are enough, and actually living a life in service to their interest. What gets their sort of heart racing, gets their blood flowing,
Hmm.
because you can go down this route of becoming a recruitment consultant, driving fast cars, and all this kind of stuff, and have all these people going, oh, you're really successful. But then, like I say, you're just draining the life out of your day to day. And it's not a fun place to be. And I think most people aren't lucky enough, like I was, to have a burnout where I physically couldn't carry on anymore. They carry on and carry on and carry on until it slowly kills
Hmm.
them. Whereas I was lucky enough to have an episode where I had to sort of go, okay, I need a reset here. And it changed the trajectory of my life. But I wonder how many people
Hmm.
do get to that retirement and they've just had the life beaten out of them, and literally their
Hmm.
retirement's not going to be anything. They've just got no energy, no love for life anymore. And I think
Yeah, well, I
that's a
think,
big.
yeah, coming back to the our ancestors in the work chapter, or the work section that we talk about, so much has become your self-worth. It comes from things external from you. What do you do? How successful are you? What have you achieved lately? How much money do you make? Where do you go on vacation? And so I think people don't learn that there's another way. I'm trying really hard. My kids are 11 and 14, and I don't want them to I want them to be their authentic selves right off the bat. I don't want them to wait until they're 45 or 50 to
Mhm.
to realize, to have the burnout. my burnout was just severe depression. And so I kind of feel the same way. I had to reset, um, and then find a new way. And what's hard though is I think it's daunting to people because we're the ones swimming upstream. You know, we're the fish going the different direction. And so there's not a whole lot of structural, societal, things to hold us up, scaffolding to help us through these things. And so, it is a little scary trying to figure out your own way and um, change your life, change how you see things, because you're not supported. So I feel like
And you've
things
had,
like this, yeah.
I was going to
Go
say,
ahead.
and you've had decades of conditioning and decades of
Mhm.
what's formed that. I mean, again, it's the society that we're in. I know a lot of it is self projection, but I mean, there's so many facets to it now. I mean, you've got social media now. It was different when we were
Mhm.
sort of growing up. Obviously, it was more a case of
Mhm.
just, I don't know, trying to be one of the crowd or trying. And I suppose in later life, it's keeping up with the Joneses. Like I say, trying to
Mhm.
keep up with that facade that you're putting out to people that again in your head I mean if that went away tomorrow those people wouldn't notice. They might have a little dig like, oh, Nick's not got a nice car anymore, but then it'll be over. I mean their life isn't going to be sort of majorly changed by it, but
Right.
we really sort of put so much importance onto it, and I think it really sort of backs a lot of people into a corner where they can't give up that comfort blanket, maybe, as I say, but that
Mhm.
comfort blanket is going to lead to chronic acute illness in later life, and
Chronic health
obviously
illness.
also a
Yeah.
shorter lifespan as well, and deathbed regrets, which is the worst one. I have a
Yeah.
feeling, I have a hypothesis as well that actually hell is actually really like serious deathbed regrets. I think there's something that we have a realization
Hmm.
at death, whether it is that there is an afterlife or we get reborn or whatever, whether there is a religious aspect to it or not. I think we just have it really laid bare to us that how much we've wasted and
Mhm.
how much time we've spent that really didn't get us forwards or backwards. It just held us in this quicksand, And I think,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's sort of definitely it would definitely be what's it, an hors d'oeuvre, an entree to hell. I think just having all this shown in
Hmm.
front of you and say, look what you just wasted. I don't know, but yes, it's
That
something
would be
that I
very hellish.
exactly, exactly. Or then watching from
So
afar and you can't do anything
yeah,
about it.
right, right. I think a lot of that is so back to kind of work. So because hunter-gatherers had an immediate return economy and they satisfied their needs when they had them, they really didn't want for anything, right?
No.
They they didn't I mean, I think an early farmer would have had more possessions than an entire group of hunter-gatherers. They didn't they didn't put meaning into possessions or even like hierarchy. A lot of the small band nomadic hunter gatherer groups were totally egalitarian. So they didn't put any stake in who's better than who and their whole way of survival is to cooperate. If you're competing with each other, the group is not going to survive.
No.
So a lot of these things, you know, we compete instead of cooperate. We gain things instead of experiences. We just have this idea that, they're better people and they're worse people. And of course, there are people who are like good and, not good, who are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But in general, like nobody just accepts that everyone is a human. And I mean, we could go and talk about this forever, social structures and discrimination and racism and stuff like that. But
So many things.
um, once we had once we started having possessions and something and worrying about the future, and that's when we started to have to like one up each other and well, you can't
Compete.
have I have to take this land before they take this land because we need a bigger army and because we want their land later. It just everything shifted, and it's only been, I don't know, 12 12,000 years since that happened. And the whole concept of the book is that there's this mismatch. Our life changed so quickly, our environment changed so quickly, and our behaviors change so quickly that our underlying biology hasn't had a chance to catch up. Um,
Yeah.
and so, but the good thing is, we can change our behavior without having to go through evolution. That's what's so cool about being humans. We're creative and we're intelligent, and we can solve a lot of problems with our brains. We've also caused a lot of problems with our brains. Um,
Mhm.
but what's awesome is that once you always have a way to make another choice. We can, you know, I read this thing, and this is what really started me getting eating much more healthily, eating much more like a hunter-gatherer would. Um, is, people always say that I'd die for my kids. But will you live for your kids? Like,
Mm,
will you do the things to take care of yourself to live for your kids? Um,
exactly.
and that was like mind blowing,
Yeah.
because that's what matters. So I don't know where I was going with that thought, but it is, everything changed, and we have this mismatch.
Yeah.
Um, and we can decide to change, but change is hard because
Yeah.
we're in our comfort zone. We need to get uncomfortable.
We're in the ego.
Um,
We're in the ego
yeah,
at the moment.
yeah.
Basically, that's something that obviously many, if you look at the oldest civilizations that we know, like look at China and you look at like monks, etc. Obviously, they've been around
Mhm.
for a very, very, very long time. And it's always the ones that seem to last are the ones that seem to have control of this ego. So coming back to what
Mhm.
you were saying about materialism, I did a whole podcast on the hedonic treadmill, which is
Mhm.
basically exactly what you're saying. It's the keeping happiness by financial rewards, by holidays, by basically kicking a can down the road. And I actually did that myself. I actually experienced it myself. Coming back to my recruitment days, I bought a really nice car once, and I remember it made me feel good for a while. And then if I
Mhm.
was feeling bad, it would make me feel good when I was going for a drive, and that was great in my early 20s. I tried to do the same in my 30s, so like 15 years later, and that lasted about a week. And after about a week, I was desperately down again, and it was like, yeah, this buying stuff every time you feel bad is not helping at all. But it's a thing. It's called the hedonic treadmill, and
Mhm.
it's the guarantee that no matter what you do, you're always going to come back to your baseline happiness. So you've got to deal with that imbalance rather than go and buy stuff. And by all means, buy as many things as you want once you've dealt with that, but don't do it to keep yourself happy, and don't do
Right,
it because
right.
of ego, because you want to show off
Mhm.
to people that are seeing what car you're driving. You don't even see it yourself. You just sit in and then go from A to B.
Exactly.
Crazy.
I totally agree. I think the whole like buying stuff thing, it's also eating stuff. Eating when
Mm-hmm.
you're not hungry. The sugar, the way our food is prepared nowadays, because we
Mm-hmm.
actually evolutionarily, it was a goal of ours as the human lineage grew and our brains grew, especially. We needed to get dense, high caloric things that are densely packed, that have a lot of energy in them, that are easy to digest and very palatable. And
Mm-hmm.
and so, I feel like I feel like now, though, we've reached what we needed to reach, and we have way overshot,
Yeah.
because we crave refined sugar because that's what we were looking for. We wanted to find foods that would feed our brains. And
Mm-hmm.
our brains only use the glucose. So I feel like now there are food scientists who know this about human beings. And so now they're
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay, well, we want people to eat this and we want people to continue to eat this. So let's put refined sugar and refined flour and refined vegetable oil and artificial colors and flavors and all of these things that we did not evolve to eat. And
Mm-hmm.
so we do not have any mechanism to handle the blood sugar loads that we subject our bodies to. So
Yeah.
what happens? We get diabetes, we get obesity, there are all of these downstream things
Mm-hmm.
because there's we have never there's no precedent in any animal's evolutionary history to handle that kind of refined glucose load.
Yeah.
Um, and so I feel like hopefully, I mean, people who understand what's going on and why am I craving this? If they can take a step back and realize that, well, I'm craving this because they want me to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's hard because life is hard, and
Yeah.
now with smartphones and screens and, social media, everyone's kind of chasing that, the
Dopamine
dopamine
hit.
hit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you really have to learn a lot. Like we're not connected to our bodies. We don't understand how our bodies work. Um, I think that's something that is really, our education system does not really cover that very well. Um,
No, no.
but people need to learn that. So then once you learn and once you learn our evolved nature about certain things, then hopefully you can start. Changing is hard, but if you have something to go to, in your back pocket, you're like, it might help make those lifestyle changes that you need.
And that's what I was saying to you
Um,
earlier as well. It's. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing people, because I suppose to an extent, other than my intuition about my body, I didn't really have knowledge about my body in my 20s. It was I was going to live forever. It
mhm.
was all about, you know what I mean, having
Yeah.
fun with your friends and, going out having
Mhm.
meals, that kind of stuff. You weren't really thinking about it, although it's in the back of your mind. Your mortality sort of hits you at a certain point, and I think for quite a lot of people, it's sort of symbolized around there or thereabouts 40 or 35, 40, when you start coming into that, I'm coming into the top of the hill, and going to be the sort of downward slope.
Right,
And I
right.
think you just get a little bit more aware of your mortality, and I think your mindset changes. And again, you start thinking
Mhm.
about how long you want to be here, what sort of kind of health you want to experience. But a lot of other people, again, it's another thing to worry about. It's another thing to bury down in the stomach and just ignore and forget about.
Mhm.
But yeah, just having that base knowledge really can. It can also, you've said the word earlier, which is actually one of my buzzwords I use for everybody in my coaching class, and that is in every topic as well as awareness. So awareness of how you're feeling, what thoughts you've got,
Mhm.
what sort of patterns there are, how you're breathing in those times, how it's physically manifesting, how it's affecting you with regards to your sleep patterns, all these kind of things. And yeah, food intolerances, all that kind of stuff. So I'm a big proponent on
Mhm.
people sort of journaling these things, and really sort of
Mhm.
getting to know themselves, and at the very, very least, paying a bit of attention to these warning signs, which our body has inbuilt to tell us when things aren't right. It's highly
Mhm.
intuitive, and there's alarm systems all over it saying, "Hey, boss, there's a problem here. That acid reflux. That's not acid.
Mayday, mayday.
Yeah, that problem isn't acid reflux. Of course, it's acid reflux, but it's what's creating it, what's causing it. Where's that dysregulation? Where's that lack of balance? Where is it you need to take that
Mhm.
focus to? And again, by learning the basics, even the basics on that nervous system, of the breath, of these foundational things, it could just allow you just to, oh, not feeling quite right. Bring yourself back in. Use a
Mhm.
technique or something
Mhm.
that's gonna sort of ground you. And I think, yeah, that would help a lot of people. But again, people are very, very busy, and they don't worry about it
Mhm.
until they end up in the hospital, unfortunately.
Mhm. Um, funnily enough, I used to have really bad acid reflux all the time.
Yeah.
And I stopped eating processed foods and I started, well, I don't not eat any processed foods, but once in a
Yeah.
while I eat processed foods. It's hard to live in this world and just be so strict. You don't let yourself do anything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I started eating a lot more plant-based whole foods. I haven't had acid reflux for 3 or 4 months, and I used to have it almost every single night.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I have really
Horrible.
bad eczema. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like, inflammation, we're always inflamed the way that our society's set up, no matter if it's from stress or from what we eat or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
my eczema is like, I mean, it's still there every once in a while. I get triggers and stuff, but it is so much better than it's ever been.
Yeah.
So that there are all of these like, and what's cool, if somebody can just try something and see a result, it reinforces that it will help them continue. And then because they're feeling better, it'll help people decide, okay, I want to try something different. I want to try something else, not something, this is working for
Yeah.
me. I'm aware, I have this awareness that these choices make me feel good.
Yeah.
What can I do now to make me feel even better? Um, so, hopefully that, before it's
That's
too late.
crazy. That reminds me of my favorite quote, and you may have seen it on my Instagram. You may have not. It's from Lao Tzu, and it's the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And
Mm-hmm.
whether that is words that you want to give somebody that thinks their problems are insurmountable, so they don't do it because I'm so unhealthy, I've got type 2 diabetes, my
Mm-hmm.
family were, excuse me, my family had this bad history. I'm done for. It's not worth starting. Or whether it be, like you say, that first thing that they do try, which is outside of the norm, that leap of faith, and they see that result, and then it takes them into, oh, if that works, I wonder if this is, and like
Mm-hmm.
you say, it starts this journey that ends up in a sort of rebirth. That's why I love breath work. Not just because of that. I love breath work because it's highly, highly effective. But when you've got people, especially the majority of the population, there's estimates that around 97% of people are breathing incorrectly. They're breathing backwards in their shoulders because they're breathing in their fight or flight. They're literally in this sympathetic nervous system all
Mm-hmm.
day. And quite literally, it's so intrinsically linked. You can get someone to do a parasympathetic breathing technique, for example, 5 rounds, and it will immediately change that nervous system state. So while the long-term effects and actually getting rid of those embedded bad habits, that default fight or flight rather than default balance, take time and take consistency, the actual immediate result
Mm-hmm.
is immediate. It's one of those things where it's not like taking
That's cool.
CBD and it's like, oh, in 30 days you might feel a bit better, and they've got to try and be consistent in that time. They'll see an immediate sort of effect of it,
That's
and then it
amazing.
kind of makes them go, okay, I'll take this a bit further. Again, as long as they're using the right breathing techniques, there's so many out there at the moment.
Right.
It's knowing where
But I
knowing
think
where to
that kind
start.
of goes back to the, like we were talking about how miraculous the human body is.
Yeah, yeah,
We can heal. Like there are people who are smokers their whole lives and have horrible lungs, and they stop smoking and their lungs heal and they don't get lung cancer. And but that, I mean, that's just kind of an extreme example. But our bodies are, I mean, we're basically set up to heal because that's how our bodies repair themselves and how we maintain homeostasis. And so once we give our body the opportunity to heal, we will. I mean, the body is
mm-hmm.
gonna heal. So anyone who says, well, it's not worth doing anything, well, if you do one thing and it heals one thing, then that's one less thing you have to worry about when you're in your 70s. There's
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing, we have a life expectancy of 78 years, but how good of a life are you living those last 15
Exactly.
years? What's the lifespan of a good life? Is it
Yeah,
60? Um, and then there's people who study, people who live, I'm sure you've heard of the blue zones.
yeah,
The
yeah,
people who live in these blue zones who live to be in their hundreds and they have such longevity and um, they don't hit 70 and then everything goes to pot. They're
yeah,
healthy the rest of their lives. Hunter-gatherers who survived into adulthood live very long lives. People are like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
the average, time of death is so young, but that's because there's lots of infant mortality and infections and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
The way they
But they didn't.
misrepresent with that one. That's one of my,
Mhm.
because I get that thrown at me all the time, and I'm like, well,
Yeah,
even when you look at
that's
hunter,
fine.
like early ancestors, hunter gatherers, even all the way through to Persians and things like that. Again, we're told all these negative things about them, but they all had perfect facial structures. They had perfect teeth. They breathed correctly. Their noses were pronounced. They had. When we're told that they were cavemen and you know what I mean, they were sort of
Mhm.
like that they weren't very civilized, but you see that their physicality, their biology was optimum.
The
um
vitality.
their vitality again, and it's like, again, it's living a life in service to life rather than working a life in
Mm.
service in
Mhm.
service to affording a life. And I think there's a big difference
Mm.
there. But coming back to
Mhm.
the blue zones and all those areas you're talking about, it's
Mhm.
holistic. Their food's good. They walk a lot. They get exercise. They're walking
Mhm.
uphill. They're
A
sociable.
garden.
They're sociable. They still say hello to their
Mhm.
neighbours. There's still a little bit of a sort of a connection there. I mean, I used to say hello to my neighbours in Portsmouth back in the UK, and they would look at me as if to say, "What are you saying hello for?" And it's like, in that even from when I was a child in the 80s, that was normal.
I have some neighbors who they open their garage door, drive their car in, close the garage door before they get out of the car. And I'm like, you don't want any human interaction, okay? I get it.
It's got bad though. It has got bad. That's unfortunately 95% of the population. It is. We've driven ourselves. I had a bit of a funny story where one of my thought exercises where I was like, back in the, let's say, pre-war era, people were out in social clubs, they were out in big groups,
Hmm.
families lived together. Like I say, neighbors got on very well, the whole
Hmm.
streets had parties. And then the TV was brought out, and then we all went into our front room, and it was just the family. It was just the four or the six of us, spending
Hmm.
some family time watching telly. And then we got these handheld devices, and then it's like the family is in the same house together but doing their own thing completely, and we're just becoming further and
Hmm.
further and further removed from any kind of community. And obviously, we are
Yep.
tribal beings, but the tribal side of things that I think is being pushed on these days, coming back to people that know how to press buttons, is pushing on the tribal side that pushes us apart. And I think that we've
Mm.
become so in our
Hmm.
heads and so completely discombobulated that actually the only part of our tribal ancestry that remains is the part where we're, like you said, where the ego first got involved and we started fighting over land,
Hmm.
and that community, that cooperative side of things is gone. And I think that would help. Going back to a cooperative side on a large scale would help so many issues. Food sources, clean, responsibly farmed
Hmm.
food sources. I mean, they can't do a population, but they can do a local community. And you're feeding
Hmm.
back into a community. You're getting high quality food. It's not being shipped here, there, and everywhere. It's reducing emissions. Anyway,
More, yeah,
I
more
go off. I go
sustainable.
off on a bit of a tangent on that one because I think it's all interconnected.
Oh,
From
totally.
a small level.
And
Yeah.
I think, the whole, we're getting pushed away. So we don't have the experience of interacting with people. We don't have the experience of interacting with strangers. And I think there are certain, there are forces that take advantage of that and cause fear. And the fear is pushing us apart even more because if you're different, it's pointing out our differences instead of our similarities, right? If you point out all
Mm-hmm.
of our differences, then you become even more separated. And you play
Mm-hmm.
on the fear, and because people aren't getting out there and learning how to be social and learning, you know, maybe some people, do like spark fear, but that's because they've had no social training. They
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
need the training too. We all need to help each other become, more socially um intertwined. But
100.
I love when you're talking about, sustainability. I'm sure you've heard of oh my gosh, I totally forgot the word. Um Something culture where you're like growing food in your community, and I was just
Oh,
talking to
permaculture.
permaculture. Thank you. Thank
Permaculture.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so that make when you were talking about everything being connected, sourcing things locally and meeting your neighbors and stuff, that is something that I've started. I mean, probably 6 months ago, I didn't know what that was. And this
Yeah.
morning I was talking to my oldest about it, feeling like, oh my gosh, that would be so much fun and so cool. But then I'm looking around my neighborhood, the guy who drives into his
Mm-hmm.
garage door and shuts it before he even gets out. I'm like, I don't know if he'd be really into that. But maybe the people who live behind us, or, just once
Yeah,
one little community at a time.
the unfortunate thing is you do have to find your tribe, which isn't as easy these days. But I suppose social media. I'm in this
Right.
sort of area, interested in doing something along these lines. Please holler if you're that way inclined, and then maybe you'll get some responses from that. But yeah, I think that I don't know why we've become so averse to it. I mean, we're social beings by our sort of very
Mhm.
nature. I mean, you're probably aware of the study where it's loneliness is said to be as carcinogenic as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's that
Mhm.
bad for us, sort of isolating ourselves. That again, we really need that, but it's kind of the way we're sort of kind of driving ourselves these days, even more so. And it's again, I come back to what I was saying to you earlier that the food that we eat, the sleep that we're getting, the stresses that we have, coming back to those, it's not a saber-tooth tiger jumping out and it's just there buzzing away in the background all day. Low grade
Mhm.
stress, just money worries. Oh,
Mhm.
what about and again, it just creates this complete imbalance. But again, all the habits we have are just completely at odds
Well, and
with ourselves.
yeah, I think our culture also, we were talking about how, our culture defines someone's worth and people define their identity with what they do and how their perfection and stuff like that are,
Mm.
their accomplishments. Um, but oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought again. Um, I didn't sleep well last night. So sleep is very important. I just totally lost
Yeah,
my,
it is.
I got it.
There you go.
Okay. Our culture, values individualism. And I think the founding of the US, rugged individualism, and you can rely on yourself, and so it's not only, the way that we think, it's actually, a cultural thing where you
Mm.
pull up your bootstraps, don't ask for help,
Yeah.
work 5 jobs. Um, you know, I remember when I had young children, we were, mothers never raised children alone. They were in a group, and how isolating
Mhm.
and utterly, no wonder there's so much postpartum depression and things like that new moms have to suffer through, because
Mhm.
they have been taught that they can do it themselves. Be an individual, you don't need anyone's help. And that is a quality that's celebrated.
Mhm.
Um, rather than you reached out for help. Good job, so let's celebrate that.
Yeah.
Our What's interesting is, a lot of these conversations this book covers kind of the four basic needs: sleep and nutrition and work and nature. But we have two other books coming out that address kind of more higher order needs. And so the next book that will come out is like social needs. And so we talk about
Yeah.
child rearing, we talk about social groups, we talk about the sexes. Um, so a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now, it really comes out in this next section, and learning how we evolved to have community. We
Mhm.
did not evolve to live in a vacuum.
No, no, totally not. And I think also as well the way that we've gone too as well. I think I don't know how it sort of fed into it, but we've kind of I don't want to sound harsh to people, but we again coming
Mhm,
back to what I was saying earlier, when we were 4 years old, back in our hunter gatherer days, that the worst thing that happened to
mhm,
us is seeing our parents save us from a saber-toothed tiger attack. Whereas today, the worst thing that's happened to a 4 year old is a lot less sort of
mhm,
traumatic, which we want. We don't want trauma for these kids. But I think it's got to a point where a lot of people in society have wrapped people up or wrapped their kids up so much in cotton wool, protected them and shielded them
mhm,
from so much that they've got this real lack of resilience. And I think that feeds into a lot
mhm,
of this feeding of the sympathetic nervous system. Again, if you were
mhm,
to tell a pre-wartime person some of the problems that kids are sort of suffering from today, they would have that attitude of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because obviously they're completely different sort of
mhm,
generation. And I think there's also a balancing act between it. Again, I think that pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing has created a lot of has stunted our ability to talk about our emotions. And that doesn't just mean talk about how we're feeling.
mhm,
It means venting our frustrations, speaking our opinion, offering what we think in a conversation, rather than a lot of people have become meek and they just say yes, people pleasers, because
mhm,
it's easier than saying no. No, saying conflict,
mhm,
or putting your opinion across. And I think all these things adding together have just, again, weakened us with regards to our resilience. And again, that complete lack of understanding of our biology, that complete lack of treating our body the way it should be, whether it be feeding it, getting enough rest, exercising, mental stimulation, nature. Those things all just added together have just really sort of compounded all these acute and chronic health issues that we're having mentally and
mhm,
physically. But I think definitely a good way to start to recover that is, like you say, books like yours and people getting an understanding on how it was. I think when you start actually talking about the hunter gatherer lifestyle and the benefits that it has, I think they're quite obvious. I think a lot of it is obvious,
Oh,
simply,
yeah. I feel like as when I was
Um,
writing it, we'd start from, if we could, single cells, and we'd go up, we talk about primates and then the human lineage and hunter
yeah.
gatherers. And then I feel like every single person who's read up to this point knows what the next chapter is going to be about, and knows exactly what I'm going
Yeah.
to say, because you can see it.
Mhm.
You're like, oh, we don't do that anymore. Oh, we don't do that anymore. I feel like, the modern chapters were the easiest ones to write because they wrote themselves.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
we had done all of this like prep work, getting people in the mindset of this is how we evolved to be. And then like, oh, we are not like that anymore.
did,
Um,
did you have any?
so
What one thing I was interested about is so in the last few years there's been not similar books, but I suppose books that are raising awareness to similar subjects,
Mhm.
indirectly or directly. So you've got things like the plant paradox, the sacred cow, the
Mhm.
carnivore code, where obviously that's more on the nutritional side of the hunter gatherer
Mhm.
way of living. But obviously they get a lot of pushback. I mean, obviously quite a few of these subjects are that I call them kryptonite. I mean, it's very the animal foods as an example is a good example of it, because obviously it's enemy number one in certain areas at the moment because of climate change and because of obviously this
Mhm.
kind of agenda.
Sustainability, yeah.
Yeah, this kind of and I understand, but there's obviously this kind of agenda that's against it. So, did you find that there was any pushback with? I know you're only literally writing the history of how it is, but even those kind of subjects sometimes can be a little bit sort of pushed back upon. Have you had any of that at all? Have you found it
I
quite
haven't
easy
yet.
to?
I mean, the book came out at the end of, so it's been almost a month. Yeah, it's been a month. It was June
Hmm.
24th. Um,
Hmm.
and so I feel like we haven't had a lot of time, and it's this hybrid published book. So I feel like we've started to be on podcasts and getting ourselves out there.
Hmm.
I think it's gonna start gaining momentum. I hope it starts gaining momentum.
Hmm.
Um, and actually, it would be really nice for it to get to the point where we get some pushback, because that means more and more
Yeah.
people are thinking about it and talking about it. Um, so we haven't encountered any of that yet, but that was one of the things when I was off social media for 12 years after my kids were born.
Hmm.
And I knew I was going to have to get back on for the purposes of this book. And I was
Yeah. Yeah.
petrified. I was so worried that I was going to have to like put myself out there, and there's trolls and there's all these horrible people, and people are going to, send me unsolicited things, and so I had this in my mind, like what it was going to be. So I expected having a book on evolution. I expected to get a lot of pushback. Um, but I probably it's because I don't have very many followers yet. But I think what's amazing and what has been can't believe I'm going to say this, but being on social media has actually really helped me um, stay on this path because of
Yeah.
who I'm deciding to follow. I'm following people who who want to understand the mind and body connection, who want to understand the mind gut connection, who want to help you. The health and wellness community is they care. They just want to help, and so I feel like the people who I'm gravitating towards are the people who are going to really jive with what we're talking about anyway. But I feel
Mhm.
like it's been such a positive experience being back on social media. And now I can
Yeah.
see how people say, social media is a double-edged sword. Probably 12 years ago, I was like, no, it's just a single-edged sword. It's all bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but now I feel like I'm like, oh, I can totally see. I mean, I'm talking to you, you live in Portugal, right?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
met a friend, I met somebody, we both commented on someone's comment. He's this 23-year-old from Sri Lanka. And we talk almost
Wow.
every day on Instagram now. We're like friends. And he lives,
Amazing.
literally on the other side of the world from us.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, this is good. I can see the positive effects. And I can see how, being on a Zoom call, interacting with somebody online is a lot different than being in person.
Hmm.
But if it's all something, if it's all that someone has in terms of connection, I can really see how the connection part of social media, not the
Yeah.
trolling part, not the let's
Mhm.
scream and be in our echo chambers and listen to us scream. Um, I can see how it's going to be it can be a really beneficial thing if you do it right.
It's built. It's the way I look at it is it's building these little. It's like I use the example of building synapses in your brain when you're learning something. You're sending out these little
Mhm.
connections, and they
Mm,
could be connections that are literally spanning the world and spanning countries,
mhm,
and maybe one day they'll sort of build into something where that is something that actually does happen on a face to face. But it's all about just building opportunities, meeting different
mhm,
people, speaking about sort of subjects that you're really interested in, seeing different
mhm,
perspectives as well. It's like also, I think another thing I've certainly been guilty of it in the past is you get on a trail of thought and you're really convinced by it, and that's your way of thinking. And like I said to you at the start of it about going into echo chambers, it's very, very dangerous to go in there
right.
and say, yeah, you're
Mhm.
right, I'm right, and you never really move forward. So it's
Yeah.
actually nice to hear different perspectives, even when people do agree with you, when they have a different way of arriving to it. It's kind of, it all adds
Mm-hmm.
to it. And
Mm-hmm.
I say to people quite often that we're all storytellers. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that will be on social media and someone will say, "Oh, you didn't discover that," and it's like, "Well, who cares who discovered what this person's talking about? We're all just storytellers. We've learned something that's fascinating, that is based,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, on some evidential sort of research and some real founding. That's my opinion. That's my sort of my sort of contribution to sending that out to the
Mm-hmm.
tribe. The only reason that tribes and humans survived is because we passed on knowledge. We passed on knowledge on how to get
Mm-hmm.
that honey out of that sort of bee's nest. We passed on the knowledge
Yeah.
that actually we could drink dairy milk again. You know, all these things, or we could get certain
Yeah.
fruits from this place at this time of year. That's how we survived, and it's no different with just passing on knowledge about more intricate things and bigger subjects, which again, it's why we've thrived. We've just continued to grow in our
Mm-hmm.
knowledge. That's one thing I think with humans. I think that one of our real innate, I think the main driving thing about the human condition is discovery. We just want to know how it works, and it starts like
Mm-hmm.
small. What's this do? And as you see, I mean, you see with the scientific community that you've come from as well, it just expands, and that's
Mm-hmm.
down to
So many
yes,
rabbit
it's a
holes to go
collective.
down.
That's definitely down to a collective. So that hive mind mentality and
Mm-hmm.
that doing things for the community still exists. The ego bit has got in there, so there is that individual thing. I think individually we just want to know how it works. We're just fascinated by how everything works, whether it's technology, whether it's nature, whether it's our own human biology, and I think that's what's fascinating. And yeah, that's what I mean, I've spent the last 7 or 8 years learning every day. Learning, I just make it a thing that every day I'm like, there's a new subject that I've been sort of putting in my list of things to learn. I'm going to learn about that today, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to start that, and I then deep dive it, and if it really presses a button, I'll go really deep into it. And other times it's just something to offer in a conversation, with someone else that might have
Mm-hmm.
that interest. But every day should be a school day. I'm a big believer of that.
Yeah. The third book so I talked about like a basic, and then we have social, and then we have cultural needs. And so
Yeah.
it talks about the arts, it talks about rituals, it talks about celebrations, it talks about religion. And something that I was really interesting when I was researching, storytelling and music and art and all of these things, is all of the things, and I never knew any of this stuff. The way our brains sync up with people when we're listening to a story, so not only is it like passing knowledge along, but we're actually forging bonds because of like
Mhm.
the oxytocin, and there's all these chemicals, hormones that are connecting hormones that when we're doing the arts, listening to stories together, listening to music together, dancing together, that actually
Mhm.
form bonds. And so,
Yeah.
we're not doing as much of that stuff anymore either.
Yeah.
The art, we're not, I don't like dancing, because I'm too self-conscious, but I want to go out there. I'm like, I want to be in some place where we're just dancing, like just
Yeah.
to dance. Like we're all kind of in the same mindset. We don't care what anyone looks like. We're just going to move our bodies together. And there's just not opportunities for that anymore. Not, I
No.
mean, I think I went to a wedding of a friend of mine who's from Ethiopia, and they were so much dancing. And it wasn't dancing like, oh, there's a dance floor, let's go on the dance floor. It
Yeah.
was just a natural part of everything. And I'm like, this is what weddings
Yeah.
need.
It's a
Weddings need
celebration.
everyone everyone needs to be
Yeah.
on the dance floor. Um, we watch movies together, and it's a similar thing. Like it's so much more fun to watch a movie in a movie theater with other people around, because
Hmm.
they're laughing, you're laughing, you might laugh a little more. Um, you might start mirroring people who are doing,
Hmm.
you have this connection with a storyteller, you're going to start, your mirror neurons are going to start firing, and not only are you going to like internalize what they're saying even better, but now you have this connection forged between you, and you have a release of some sort of hormone, and now you have a bond. And so that's actually a really, I'm looking forward to that book, because it's when just so many societal things come together. Um,
Yeah.
that and it's also a little bit harder because the sleep and work and all these things, it's a lot more empirical. And there's research, it's not psychology or, there's all kinds of sciences that people think are like more fluffy, I guess. But humans are so complicated, you got to have some fluffy science.
100%. And I think also the long so again, coming back to, yeah, we're worrying about bills, we're worrying about work, we're worrying about all the things that sort of preoccupy us. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying by just changing the way you think those problems go away. And I say to people all the time, but what I always say to my clients is, by being worried and anxious about it, is it going to go away? And they're like, no. I'm like, no, it's still there, needs to be dealt with. So surely it's better to be in a position of acceptance with these things, where you can be a little bit sort of clearer minded to deal with these challenges, and still give yourself some time, still go out dancing. Oh, I can't go out dancing at the moment, I've got this big stress on. Go out dancing, see what positive effect that has on your psyche, and see if that actually gets you into a place where, coming back to what we were saying earlier about meditation is just getting into a place where you're clearing your mind. And if you're in a really stressful scenario and you go out and you let your hair down with your friends for a few hours, you're generally going to forget that. And that is the time when you, as I say, you might find that creative sort of solution to that problem. You might be thinking better. You may be thinking in a sort of a more structured and positive way to actually find a way out of it. But yeah, I think
You're just giving your nervous system a break.
The very least is what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And again, it's realizing that everything's temporary, and if we don't ever allow ourselves to do that, we've got no chance of escaping that. You're always going to be in that sort of circle, in being stuck in the head in your thoughts, and you're never going to escape it. So surely at least giving it a go is worth the try, is what I always say to my clients. And they tend to say that as soon as they have that different mindset about things, as soon as they can really start using a little bit of their time to go, do you know what, these things aren't worth worrying about, and slowly but surely knocking things off so there's not so much occupying their minds, just gets them slowly but surely back into a place where, again, it doesn't solve that problem that's there, but it gets them into a place where they can really start mapping out a way forwards. Yeah, and you just can't do that from chaos. You can't do that from chaos and from that sympathetic, excitatory agitation, It's a very, very tough one.
I watched your elastic band analogy metaphor. And when you were talking about that, I was thinking about that. Like, if you have it out here for too long, it's going to like break or freeze that way. You need to be able to return, at least at the more oftentimes you can return to where, you're in a relaxed state of mind. Then when you go there the next time, it'll be easier to get back, and
Exactly.
so I did really like that metaphor a lot.
Thank you. And there's also like an actual side to it where you've got the gut brain axis, which you probably know about anyway, which obviously sends a lot of those signals down via that hypothalamus control center. And again, by it being stretched for so long, it's just completely dysregulates that. So the signals aren't getting down to the stomach, they're not getting down to the digestion, they're not getting to where they should, and that's when you get dysregulation there. But if you can just balance it, you don't even have to go for the parasympathetic, you don't have to put yourself to sleep. Even if you can do things where you're stimulating both, because that's where we want to be in our waking day. We want to be 45% parasympathetic, 55% sympathetic, and it's going to do this every sort of 200 minutes or so, and that's where we want to be. We want to be in that perfect balance. But again, I think the first thing is a bit of awareness to it, and then just realizing how these very, very simple yet extremely effective methods can help. And again, food, very, very simple. I know we say that it's much easier to go and stick something in a microwave and sort of a pre-packed meal. I understand it's easier, but actually it's very simple to go and get nice food, and it's actually quite a nice experience cooking in the evening and feeding your family and making a thing of it as well, making it all of you are going to be at the table tonight, we're going to make this a social event. We're going to play a bit of music, we're going to have a bit of fun. I think we need to really, really sort of try and re-engage ourselves, because we're just getting more and more. And now we've got these headsets that everyone's going to be using. It's going to get
Yeah, those ocular implants. They're going to be looking at you, but they're going to be watching a movie.
Crazy. Okay, well, I don't know if you want to carry on going. I mean, I don't ever rush.
I could probably carry on forever, but I need to go pick up my kid from work.
What I'll do is I don't really edit them much. I don't really feel there's any need to take ers and ums out. If you send me over any links that you want me to include in the show
Oh
notes,
yeah, I
yeah.
will.
So links to your social media, to anything that you want to on Amazon, anything like that at all. And obviously, if I
Okay.
have your Facebook links as well, when I share it myself, I'll copy you in, and if you do the same as well, it just means
Mhm.
it just goes out to defeats the evil algorithms.
Yeah, I'm mostly on, well, we're on Facebook. The book has a Facebook, the book has Instagram. I have Facebook and I have LinkedIn, but I'm really
Hmm.
finding, I don't know, Instagram seems to be where I'm the most comfortable. So I just started
Hmm.
following you on Instagram, and I think I
Excellent.
follow, um, you have two Instagram accounts, don't you?
A personal one and nervous system nuts.
Yeah, so I'm now following both of those. So
Yeah,
so
brilliant.
you
No,
so if
super.
you yeah,
I'll follow
you
you
can
back.
tag on the origin of being, and that'll come, and then we can. I'm still learning all this new stuff.
Well, you've got a contact here
Mhm.
now, and again, I'm a big believer in, like I said, sharing knowledge and helping people in their own
Yeah, me
journeys
too.
as well. So anytime you need any help, let me know. I'll get those over to you, give
Thank
you a
you.
confirmation on the release, etc. And as I say, it would be nice to get this booked in again when the dust has settled, when you're through your sort of promotion, and maybe just have a catch up and go into a bit more detail on some of the subjects there. But I'm going to finish the last 100 pages tonight. I'm
Okay.
really super enjoying it.
Well,
I'm
it's
really
been
quite
nice
excited.
to get it out there and to get feedback too, because when you're just writing, you're in your own personal echo chamber.
Hmm.
Um, and it wasn't until kind of I was giving it out to like my pre-readers, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to read it. And then, and then to hear people are like, oh, I'm enjoying it. I'm like, okay, that like I was on the right track. The book, the idea, the way it's laid out, like it's just good confirmation. Like my book confirmed your podcast and your kind of your work and what you're interested in, and vice versa. So
Superb. Well, no, keep doing what you're doing. It reads very well. It's a great book. I'm loving it so far. I will get it finished. Very keen to see the next ones as well, and to keep a contact. And like I say, this is
yeah.
definitely the journey I'm on. And it's very nice to see that there's more people trying to get these messages out there, which again, it can
Hmm.
only benefit people if they start getting this sort of, again, just a base understanding on how their biology
Hmm.
really should work, and what
Yeah.
we've stopped doing, not what we're doing so much. I mean, obviously there is a lot of detrimental things,
Mm.
but mainly what we've stopped doing. A lot of it's very simple.
And what we've
A lot of it,
replaced it with.
exactly. It's not.
Yeah.
It's strange, really, as well, because it doesn't even really compare, does it? If you think about it,
Mhm.
a steak and a donut. Steak, you know, again, like nice, calm sort of community, or work, stress. Again, doesn't compare.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yep.
we need to start getting some balance back. That's for sure.
And I think more and more people I see hope because the people I follow, have followings, and, more and more people I think are realizing that this is not the right way to live. And a lot of people like you and me, we like change mid-course. A lot of
Hmm.
like MDs who were
Yeah.
trained in the traditional medicine are now like, nope, I'm going to be a functional medicine doctor. They get it.
This symptom management, this putting a plaster on a broken limb, is kicking a can down the road, and we can see those downstream effects. We know that it's going to. I suppose most of those medical doctors probably even know when they give a prescription, like especially one of the common prescriptions. They know that in 5 years, 6 years, whatever the timer is, it's going to be the next thing. It's going to be and they
Mhm.
know it. I mean, doctors know. They're just hand strung in the industry they're in. So,
They really are.
like you say,
They
they have
really
to
are.
either take a decision and go into a private practice and become complementary, as we call it, or integrative,
Hmm.
or they just keep doing
Hmm.
the same thing. And again, probably doing the same thing to themselves. Mental health
Mm.
isn't great. You know, then they're working themselves to the
Mm.
bone in a system they know is broken. So it's all about
It's
awareness. That's
so
all it
true.
is. People power
Mhm.
will push it. So let's just keep getting that drum banged
Yeah.
as much as we can. Lovely to speak to you.
You too. Take care. Have a great evening.
See you later. Thank you very much.
I'll be in touch.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
So, what did you think of that, guys? Like I said, completely lost my trail of thought with it. I don't think we even asked about links, etc. I didn't ask her to promote the book. Again, the questions I had lined up, I'm going to save them for another podcast someday. At least some of them will be usable, although most of them were specifically around the book. So maybe what I'll do is I'll save them up and I'll have round 2 with her and Luke. And we'll have a bit more structure, but I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Like I say, guys, I will put all of the useful links for Jenny in the podcast notes, but I highly recommend the book. Go and check out the website, go and check out both of the guys as well, and I think you're really going to enjoy the read. But hope you enjoyed the show. I'll see you again next week, guys. Thank you. Bye. The Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience.